So, Judge Maria Lazar, welcome to my little corner out here in Polk County. So, everybody gets an introduction. I tried to do justice to get a little bit of summary here. So, I'll read off what I've got, and then you can tell me if I nailed it. So, your history reveals a jurist who is deeply embedded in the textualist tradition and who has consistently navigated the most contentious legal issues in Wisconsin recent history. Your early private practice in Milwaukee provided you with the requisite skill for a complex civil litigation, while your 5 years as an assistant attorney general established you as a primary advocate for state legislative authority during the political shifts of the 2010s. Your subsequent elevation to the circuit court and appellate court has allowed you to apply your philosophy to criminal, juvenile, and environmental law, often resulting in rulings that favor restricted administrative agency power and protected constitutional rights regarding firearms and property. How did I do? Sound right?
That's perfect. That's exactly right. You hit all the right angles and right descriptions.
So, because out here, a lot of people say we see ads for Chris, but in my mother-in-law, who actually lives in Slinger, says I see Chris Taylor all the time, and she drives me nuts.
No comment.
So right, of course. So when I said, well, I'm going to be interviewing Judge Lazar tomorrow, she was really excited about that. So tell me a little bit about your personal history. Family, you got kids? Let's get to know
Yes.
Maria.
So I was born in Milwaukee, lived my entire life in Wisconsin, but for the 3 years I went away to law school at Georgetown. And I actually married my high school sweetheart, although we were in competing high schools. And we've been married for many, many years. I don't tell you how many because that'll age me. We have 2 children. I don't usually talk about them in this campaign. I talk about them to anyone else. And they're both doing exceedingly well. And I'm back in Waukesha County. I've been here almost my entire life. And it's great to be in this part of Wisconsin. It's great to be doing this campaign and going everywhere in Wisconsin.
How about your legal history? Where'd you come from? Where'd you start? How'd you get to the appellate court? That's an interesting level to reach.
So the funny story is when I was in 4th grade, I decided that I was not going to be an archaeologist because they go to hot areas. So I decided I was going to go into law, become a lawyer. And so my whole career was headed that way. I went to Mount Mary College, which is a women's school college. My mom went there, and so I followed her. And then after that, I went to Georgetown to do international law, I thought, and then I didn't like international law. I came back. I practiced for about 20 years in a litigation firm, a very small litigation firm in Milwaukee. And after that, someone put a flyer on my desk saying that the Department of Justice was looking for attorneys in bankruptcy areas, and that was one of my areas. So I applied, and I worked for 5 years at the Department of Justice. I got there right before, and I never worked for, I got there right before Scott Walker started, and that's when the Capitol sort of went crazy with all the lawsuits and all the cases. But even though I did all these big cases, it was the one case I worked on for a foster care case where the foster child was, the parents didn't want to keep one of the foster children. And I had a Dane County judge tell me on the record that the law did not matter. And I lost. And I was so upset that I went home and I said, you know what? I can do better. So I ran for judge in my home county of Waukesha. And I was on that bench for 7 years, so 6 years plus another election. And then when this position came up on the Court of Appeals, I love to write, I love to read. So I ran for that in a contested race, and I won. And District 2 is sort of all the counties around, but not including Milwaukee. You know, you're going from Winnebago and Calumet and Manitowoc all the way down to Racine and Kenosha. And on that bench, I have just loved my work. I've been there 4 years. So overall, I've had about 11 years of judicial experience. And I think that together with my private practice and public work really puts me in a position to be one of the better, more experienced justices on the state Supreme Court.
So that's a good segue. Let's talk a little bit about your judicial philosophy. What I've seen in the research that I've done is it looks real similar to what I heard from Brian Hagedorn.
It is very similar. So my theory on judicial philosophy is I follow Neil Gorsuch and other justices on the U.S. Supreme Court that we call it originalism, but I call it with a little touch of textualism, and I'll explain that. So I look at the statute, the Constitution, the law first. You look first to that, and then you start looking in little circles that go away from that law. You look at the headings, you look at the other statutes in the sections, you look at other things, and then you start looking a little deeper and you get maybe to um, dictionaries and other things. I'm not a justice or a judge. I'm not, won't be a justice who looks at the law and says what I want it to be. I look at the law and I look to what the drafters meant it to be. And I will never jump ahead. I will never legislate. I don't have an agenda. I don't have a personal point of view that I try to get across when I'm deciding a case. That's why when I declare what I am, I've always been independent. I've been impartial. I've never been a justice. I've never been a judge who has been a member of a political party. I've never been a member of a political party. I'm always looking to purely what the law says, what it means, and how to interpret it in a way that's constitutionally sound.
Interesting. What's a lot of people have asked me. So when you talk to Judge Lazar, ask her about this, that, or the other thing. What's your perspective on abortion? What's your perspective on Second Amendment? I'm like, well, that's not really what a Supreme Court justice does. That opinion shouldn't really matter.
No, and it's funny because my personal views, I like to tell people that we put the black robes on and we keep our personal views behind them. But I can tell you that Marquette Law School did a poll, and 84% of the people of my home state of Wisconsin, I was born and bred here, um, they want to know what their justices and their judicial candidates think and how what they stand up for. So on my website, Judge Maria Lazar, Lazar.com, I've put position papers on really important issues. I started out with redistricting. I've written about abortion, believe it or not. I'm addressing that head on. My latest one was on religious freedom. And I just think it's really important that people get to see and hear what their candidates stand for. My opponent, on the other hand, doesn't go a lot of places and doesn't even talk about her views and where she stands on any of these issues at all. Now, ethically, we will neither of us, well, at least I won't, tell you how I'd rule on a case. But I think it's really important that you get a sense of where I stand and that I stand for the Constitution. I stand for the rights that we have. And I think that's really important when you're looking at a justice candidate. And you have to look at my website compared to hers, where she has nothing whatsoever about her positions. And all she does is throw shade sort of on me and tell me she knows what I'm thinking about things, which, quite frankly, she does not.
Somehow that doesn't surprise me.
Nope.
Uh,
Pure politician move.
Pure politician move, right? And
Exactly.
I have seen a disturbing amount of that from the last several justices who have been elected to the Supreme Court. It's really, really, really concerning. We don't have to go there. Obviously, you're well aware.
And it's funny too. You mentioned, or we were talking before about some of the ads that are out there, and Chris Taylor's first ad talks about affordability, prices of food, prices of healthcare. And I want to tell you, while judges personally care about those things, we have no impact whatsoever. That's purely political. That's purely what your legislature does and your governor or president. It has nothing whatsoever to do with the judicial race. And it just shows from the gate, Chris Taylor is a politician through and through.
Well, not to mention, a higher up in Planned Parenthood.
Right. She was their policy director. And I've actually asked, and we've reached out and said, what's her position? And she won't tell us.
So, what I have seen, some of the arrows that the liberal side throws at you specifically is you've come out and said, I'm a fair, impartial justice. I've never been appointed to anything. I've earned everything, every seat that I've gotten. What they throw back is, well, we also see that you've got a fair amount of funding from some pretty far right people. So how does that affect your decision making on the bench? How do you ensure that that's not going to be a factor?
So, and this is actually a really funny question because it started out before I even ran or even decided I was going to run for this position. They were throwing words and phrases around on all these big money donors that were going to back me. And the funny thing is that my fundraising shows that's not true at all. And when you compare and contrast, my money from donors is coming from the state of Wisconsin, from individuals here, and Chris Taylor is raising money in California and other elite cities. And the concern that's humorous to me is that I'm reaching out to individual donors. I'm talking to small groups of people. I'm going everywhere that I can to talk to people. Even I'm not limiting myself to any political party whatsoever. And I see the opposite going on with my opponent. As to donations impacting my ability to be impartial, that's just not true at all. I've always been a judge on every bench, be it the circuit court, the Court of Appeals, and now on the Supreme Court if I'm fortunate enough to get the votes from the citizens of my state. I'm someone who always believes that the appearance of impropriety is really, really as important as having a bias. If I feel that there's a circumstance that requires me to recuse, I will. I follow what the US Supreme Court did in a case called Caperton, which talks about a bias that's so big and so extreme that, of course, the justice had to recuse. The state of Wisconsin actually now has petitions, well, a petition filed in front of the state Supreme Court talking about recusal rules. But if you're going to compare apples to apples, my opponent is getting money from groups and the Democratic Party and other entities and unions that, maybe we should be asking the same question to Chris Taylor. And I've always been open, honest, and upfront and transparent in what I will do and how I will rule. And not how I will rule, and that I will rule independently. And I just don't see that coming from my opponent or some of the past elections that we've had for Supreme Court justice. People have been really tied to large groups, and that's just not the case at all for me.
Um, Constitutional rights. So you recently
Yes,
released a position paper identifying religious freedom as the first freedom.
yes.
It must be protected from government coercion. I can't agree with you more on that. Of course, the liberals will say, as a Supreme Court justice, how would your approach or how would you approach cases where the individual's religious freedom may conflict with other protected civil rights or state laws designed to prevent discrimination?
Well, and that's an interesting question, and it's sort of one that it's very hard to answer when you're in the abstract. Or and it's I can't answer if it was dealing with a specific case, but what I can tell you is that I believe strongly in our constitutional rights. And if you have two that are going to conflict, then it's a big question about, I believe the advocates, the attorneys in front of us, have to really present their case, their arguments about which one would take precedent or be superior. And then I would have to make that decision based on what I'm hearing in the case. Now, from what I can tell you now, there are certain freedoms and certain rights that have more 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 influence, more play in the Constitution, and those would be ones that you would look at first. But there's always a balancing test that a justice or a judge has to do when cases come up and you've got some conflicts.
On sentencing and public safety. So this one, I'm like, I don't even know if I want to go here, but it seems like you're pretty open to bouncing back on the stuff the liberals are throwing at you. So
Sure.
this one's your campaign has emphasized tough on crime approach, particularly in cases involving children.
Yes.
However, past opponents have criticized specific sentence you handed down. as a circuit judge, such as that of a former federal agent convicted of sexual assault. What specific criteria are most important for a judge to consider when balancing rehabilitation with the protection of victims in the community?
So, first of all, in every criminal case now, we have a constitutional amendment called Marsy's Law, which has to do with victims' rights. And it's one that actually my opponent, Chris Taylor, voted against twice when she was in the legislature. And the state of Wisconsin voted in favor of it about 75% in favor of that constitutional amendment. And it gives victims the rights when you're doing sentencing, when you're doing criminal cases um, in front of a criminal court. With regard to my view, how I sentenced people when I was in circuit court, I was a criminal judge for maybe 3 or 4 years. I was presiding in that branch in Waukesha County. You have to look at three things. You have to look at the seriousness of the offense. You have to look at protection of the public, and then you have to look at rehabilitation of the defendant, and then you take into account some other factors and what they've done. And those are the things I've always looked at and I've always done. And I've had sentences where I had a young individual who was moved up to adult court and was about 17. And I believe he was sentenced for about 35 years in prison for what he did. The case that humorously, the other side criticized me about during my Court of Appeals run, when I was running for Court of Appeals, they took one of my sentences out of context and didn't play the second half of my sentence. It was a case where a gentleman was accused of, he was an agent, he was accused by 5 women of sexual assault, and the end result is that the jury found him guilty in one case. And each of the women that he was accused of had been in dating relationships with him. And so the sentence that the other side took about me was where I said, this wasn't a case where he grabbed a woman off the street and they stopped there. But the rest of my sentence was, when I was speaking from the bench, this is a case where it was a dating relationship, and it's much worse because there was a complete breach of trust. And so when they ran the ads against me in that race, they made it sound like I thought date rape was not a serious offense, and that's not at all the truth. And the sentence that I imposed was a harsh sentence. He ended up getting some significant jail time, very significant prison time that was imposed but withheld because of certain circumstances. But I would never, ever, with looking at my actual record, if you looked at it, say that I was someone who was soft on crime. I I don't think I was hard on crime or soft on crime. I think I was appropriate. And I think that my sentences showed those three factors and made a determination of what was necessary and important for the citizens of my community. And that's the only thing I was looking at. And I don't understand how they can take that one phrase and not use the other half of it, which showed my real personal views.
Well, that's my opinion is I see that all the time from the left.
Yes.
Pick and choose and twist and formulate false reality from the color of fact is kind of how I look at it. So let's shift gears a little bit and think about talking to the audience at Lincoln Day dinner. And one of the purposes of Lincoln Day, obviously, is to get out the vote.
Yes.
So, from a get out the vote perspective, why don't you lay it on the line for me what this upcoming election means for the court in general?
So if I were speaking at a Lincoln Day dinner, I always start out with some quotes from Abraham Lincoln, and I won't tell you those now and bore you with those, but I will tell you that there are three reasons why this race is so very important, and three reasons why the choice is so simple. The first is that I just have more judicial and legal experience. I have 7 years on the circuit court compared to my opponent's 2. I have almost 4 years in the Court of Appeals compared to her about 3. So that's about 5 to 11 years of experience on the bench. My experience as well before that in the private practice world and the Department of Justice are also extremely different than hers. She has had time with a private law firm and then Planned Parenthood as their not only attorney, but as their policy advisor. And then following that, as a member of the Democratic Party, which is my second point, is that I am 100% a judge, not a politician, and my opponent is a politician first. She spent 9 years in the legislature as a member of a party. She was elected as a Democrat from downtown Madison, and she is someone who still to this day looks to push forward a personal agenda, a political agenda, things that she couldn't do as a Democrat as a legislator, she's trying to do as a judge. And we do not need anyone on the state Supreme Court who is going to put their personal views first. We need an individual who is through and through constitutionally driven and someone who will always, always put the law first and their personal views second. So you have that I have more experience and that I'm not a politician and my opponent is. And the last thing is that right now this court is 4-3 conservative to, well, 4-3 liberal to conservative, but you need 3 justices to vote to hear an appeal from the Court of Appeals. So this minority of 3, if it becomes a minority of 2, I think that more than half the state of Wisconsin, my home state, and by the way, Chris Taylor is a California girl, born and bred there, raised there through high school, and then came to Wisconsin. But I think that people in my state want a common sense, practical, independent view of the law, and they will lose that ability if we lose this seat. And it will be lost for about 10 years. If we do not have a judge or justice now on that court who is going to maybe try to soften the edges, be a little more collegial, try to bring people together to have opinions that circuit court judges understand. This race on April 7th, the Tuesday after Easter, is so important that people have to get out and vote, tell their friends to get out and vote, because we can win this, and we will win this seat. This is a seat that I think is going to restore justice, integrity, and faith in the state Supreme Court. I go around the state now and I talk to people. I talk to independents, conservatives, liberals. I talk to groups that hate everybody in between. And the one thing that I tell them and the one thing they like is that I will be that independent, impartial voice on the state Supreme Court. I will not bend to either side. I have no agenda that I'm trying to advance. I am not there to please any particular party. I'm not there to use the law as an attack against people. I'm not there to say there's a mandate, which the liberal court has already said. They believe they have a mandate to do it their way. And quite frankly, I find that insulting. This is a state Supreme Court. We are a judiciary. We don't have mandates. So what I would tell people at Lincoln Day dinners or any other event that we are at, why this race is important, why you have to tell your friends and everyone to vote, because we can win this. We need to win this to restore the heart, the soul, the justice on that state Supreme Court. Because if the public doesn't have faith in this court, that's one of our 3 branches of government. You run the risk of really losing the support of the people, and we need that support, and we need to be a court. We need to have a court in Wisconsin that is dedicated, determined, and honest. And that's what I will bring to this court. And that's what I tell people at Lincoln Day dinners, although I do start out and tell them nice things about Abraham Lincoln and about Ronald Reagan. But when you put it all together, I have more experience. I am not a politician. And this race is so, so important.
Very, very well said. So, as you were talking, I was thinking about one of the things that really irritates me about what the liberal activists have done to the Supreme Court. I'd kind of like to get your just opinion on it. Really, nothing to do with our presentation talk here, but taking the Chief Justice and turning it into a committee. I mean, how is that even possible? Blew my
Well,
mind.
that's not even the most damaging thing this court did. When the majority turned, you have to understand, before this, the majority was liberal. there were people who on the court, justices, who didn't like the chief who was there for a long time, Shirley Abramson, and they never, ever created a committee to diminish her vote and to make her not the Chief Justice. But the minute that the liberal majority took over that court, they did two things. One, they fired the director of state courts, Judge Randy Koshnick. He wasn't even in the state of Wisconsin. He was in, I believe, Washington, D.C., and they fired him without even taking a vote of the entire court. So that was on August 1, which was when you turn over. But then they also created this committee of 3 where they put 2 liberals, justices, and the Chief Justice on that committee and said, from now on, that's how this court will run, not by Chief Justice, which is statutorily how it's run, internal operating procedures, how it's run. Instead, they created this committee, and then they second-guessed everything that the Chief Justice, because at that time, the Chief Justice was Justice Annette Ziegler, and she was on the minority now, and they basically eliminated her vote, eliminated her position, and created this committee that no one's seen before. And I kind of wonder a little bit, when tables turn and whatever time it is down the road, because everything turns, you know, people go from Republican governors to Democratic governors, and Senate seats flip, and the court will flip eventually. What would happen? Are they going to keep that committee? And so that if there was a Democratic, or not Democratic, if there was a liberal Chief Justice, are they going to allow 2 conservative justices to be on that committee to tell the liberal justice what she has to do as chief? I don't think so, but I don't know. I think it was just a big overreach that wasn't required, because the new constitutional rules are that Chief Justices are picked every 2 years, and it would have happened anyway. And it just happened this spring, and last year, 25, where they picked a new Chief Justice who's now liberal. And so are they keeping that committee? Are they allowing it to be filled with who or what? Or are they letting that Chief Justice operate as a chief? And I think they're letting her operate as a chief.
Right. It kind of reminds me of the dangers of doing away with the filibuster. And
Yes.
it's will help.
Things turn around.
Things turn around, right? Helps you in the near term, but it's going to bite you in the future.
Absolutely.
You're going to be stuck with me as your surrogate at my Lincoln Day on Saturday, so
that's fine. I trust you to cut this up whichever way you want. So perfect.
And then while I'm thinking about, we'll make a pitch for come out and see Judge Lazar at Freedom Up North in Webster on the evening of March 17th, St. Patty's Day. So
St. Patrick's Day will be great. I'll even wear green.
There we go. So
I love going up north. I mean, I would say one of the most fun things about this campaign, and being totally honest, I have loved going everywhere in the state. I've been to counties that I've driven through, never really stopped to talk to people, and I love it. I mean, I'm rediscovering Wisconsin, how much I love it, and how much every area and every group of people, you know, everywhere has been just wonderfully nice and kind and fantastic.
Yeah, I'm not worried about north of 29 for you. I'm worried about south of 29.
Yep, and you know, I've been in Dane County and Milwaukee County a lot, and Waukesha and Ozaukee and Washington and everywhere else, and Eau Claire. I just think that this is a race where my opponent is just so extreme and so political that there's really no question here. And I think that people looking at it, even people who are liberal, even people who are Democrats, I think they're going to say, hey, we really need to make a court that is a court and is something that where justice will be done.
Impartial. So objective? Really?
I'm hopeful.
All right.
I'm very hopeful. So thank you, and we will definitely see you on the 17th.
You got it. Looking forward to it.
Excellent. Thank you.